am going to have, Ron is going to be a host, and then Ron will have you guys go to a breakout room for executive session.
Veronica, did you have a nice break?
It was, yeah, it was all right. It was the most different holiday season for sure. And my husband had surgery the day, like on January 4th. So we kind of like, our kids weren't around anyhow, but we like completely isolated ourselves. We were so afraid he might get something. So it was, yeah, I will look forward to not having to be isolated all the time.
Right. Yeah, I made my mother dinner and dropped it off. Yay.
Well, at least it was something, right? My dad came and picked up food here. We
Yeah.
exchanged food.
Yeah.
Ron, make sure I make you a host before I drop you off, before I get off.
I will do that.
Yeah, I can't do it right now.
I don't want to be in the room.
I could put you in a waiting room, though. I can see I can do that. Good? Are you, okay. Cool. And then, John, they're going to go into executive session, and when they go into executive session, you can just exit for the streaming portion of it.
Ron, again.
How you doing, Mike?
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just text Leslie to make sure, please.
I don't know, it looked like the Snyder household was pretty pleased with the results of the game last night. So I don't know if they-
That was quite a game.
Sure was.
I always felt sorry for Pittsburgh.
I did it.
Almost.
Almost.
No.
I couldn't lose. I couldn't lose on that one. I think Ben will retire.
Yeah.
He's got one more year.
They got a lot of money.
Is he 40 yet?
Yeah, but he's still
give her a call.
If I can,
I'm gonna
I can
check.
call it
Gary
too.
wants to. You're up, Gary.
Yeah. So are we gonna, Veronica, do we do the budget hearing first?
Yes, before we even call to order anything, I'll just. Okay, so I'm going to give you information about the tax budget that we have for fiscal year 2022. And I'm just going to share a quick screen. This is a requirement that we have with the state of Ohio to put the wrong screen up, but that's okay. That we have to tell the auditor how we're going to spend our money and the need that we have. So this is kind of an old law in the state of Ohio that you have to send this to the county auditor. So since we do the 5-year forecast, the tax budget basically just mirrors what's in the 5-year forecast. So probably the biggest thing where we collect taxes is the I want to go to where we collect where we really have an issue for the tax budget is where do we collect taxes. And for our district, we have the general fund, we have bond retirement, and we have classroom facilities. So we just really have to tell the county auditor that last year, this is how much we spent. We're going to spend this much in 2021 and what we anticipate to spend in 2022. And basically, again, the whole tax budget just mirrors our 5-year forecast. We just need to take a look at this. I needed to, I've already given it to you and you had a chance to take a look at it. And there are other things in the tax budget besides tax collection funds. We also do have to tell them how much do we think we're going to spend in our other categories of funds. We look at what is our debt. The only debt that we have as a district that's voted is our bonds for the school. And that issue will $2 million in interest that we have to spend. And we just tell the auditor that so they know about how much they need to collect to pay off that debt. We have no tax advance notes. And then we send this all to the auditor and they sign the certificate. They give it back to us. Basically, what it really does is, hey, auditor, we really do need you to collect taxes on our behalf, and here's the justification for it. So, like I said, I had given you this in advance. The hearing is just a requirement that we have to do along with that before you vote on it. And that is up for voting in the organizational meeting. So I don't know if anybody has any questions regarding the tax budget. If you do, I'd be happy to answer anything. And when we're done with this portion, we can actually start the actual board meeting. This is the informational part of it in advance. So does anybody have any questions?
Have we gotten any information from the auditor's office in terms of property taxes being lowered or they haven't collected because of COVID?
I have not seen a decrease in the collections that we've received at Marion City Schools.
Okay.
So the last collection would have been in June.
June.
And
Yeah.
that collection was actually more than it was the year before. That we had revaluation last year.
Right.
I think you'll really notice if we're going to have any kind of decrease, it'll be on the next tax bill because the first one went out before COVID. Then you just had the second half, and the second half is always a lower collection than the first half. So I think that if anything does happen, it would be then. But I think that's a really valid question to ask them. So I end up having to meet with the county auditor and we go over this budget, and I'll ask that question when I'm there if they anticipate any changes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else? All right, so we're ready to move on to the organizational
Yep.
part. Okay. Sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulties here, so hold on just a minute. All right, I will.
Can I ask, do you guys see, do you see a flag?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
All right, so I will call this organizational meeting to order at 4:36. And if everybody will join me and for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the
and
republic,
to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
nation
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call, please.
Can you give me one split second here
Sure.
and I'll get the meeting up here. Okay. Roll call. Mr. Imes,
Here.
Mr. McCreary,
Here.
Mr. McInnes,
Here.
Mrs. McKay,
Here.
Mrs. Snyder.
Here. All right, we'll move on to the election of officers. The election
President,
of-
I like to nominate for president for the 2021 year, Leslie Schneider.
I'll second that.
All
Could I
right,
ask who seconded that?
Ted McInnes.
Ted.
Okay.
All right. Are there any others? With no others, we'll close the nominations. For myself, Leslie Schneider, as president of the Marion City School Board for 2021. Now we will do the oath of office.
Vote.
We need to
Oh,
vote.
a roll call, please.
Yes. Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Motion carried.
Okay. Now we could do oath of office. Do you want to, I'll stand. You can stand or not stand. Do you, Leslie Snyder, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as the President of the Board of Education of the Marion City School District, Marion County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your predecessor is selected and qualified.
I do.
All right, congratulations.
Thank you. All right, next we will move to to nomination for the vice president.
I would move Gary Imes for the position of vice president for the year 2021.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, roll call. Well, with no nominations, we will close the nominations for vice president. We can have a roll call, please.
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, motion carried.
All right, Mr. Imes, if you want to stand and raise your right hand. Do you, Gary Imes, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as Vice President of the Board of Education of the Marion City School District, Marion County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuation in said office and until your successor is selected and qualified?
I will.
Well, congratulations, Mr. Imes
Thank you.
and Mrs. Snyder.
Thank you. All right. So I have a quick question. With these resolutions, do we have to vote separately on each one, or can we roll them all in together into one motion?
I think here you're going to want to do them separately.
Separate, okay.
Yeah.
Thought maybe that was the
I
case.
think you can on the next agenda, but if you got
Okay.
separately. Here, I have on the screen the content of that, and then I'll go back to the motions.
Hold on. All right. So,
I would move that we set the time and place of our meetings as indicated on the screen in front of us for the calendar year 21.
I'll second.
all right. Thank you, Gary. Any discussion? Okay, with none, roll call, please.
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Motion carried. All right, next we will move on to the renewal membership of the OSBA. Approved membership in Ohio School Boards Association for the 2021 calendar year at a rate of $8,871.
So moved.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
thank you, Coach Mack. Any discussion? All right, None,
Mrs.
roll call,
McKay?
please.
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
McCreary, Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Motion carried. The next resolution is the Board of Education Service Fund. Board approval for a Board of Education Service Fund, the amount of $5,000.
Also move.
Thank you, Gary. All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Motion carried. Board resolution authorizing the treasurer to pay all bills within limit of the appropriation resolutions as prescribed by Ohio Revised Code 3313.18 as bills are received under assumption goods received or services performed acceptable. Also authorizing the treasurer to sign all checks drawn on blank accounts of the school district as prescribed in Ohio Revised Code 3313.08.
So moved.
Thank you, Kelly.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mr. McInnes,
You're muted, Ted.
Yes.
oh, Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Motion carried. All right, next resolution, the approval of the 2022 tax budget as presented. Just heard about. Motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Coach Mack.
Second.
Thank you, Gary. Roll call, please.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. McInnes, Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Okay, Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was typing a message to everyone, and it apparently won't let you speak when you're typing.
Oh,
Oh. All right, thanks, Ted. Motion carried. Next, we'll move on to the approval resolution authorizing treasurer to invest funds both active and inactive.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mr. Imes?
Yes.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Motion carried. Next is the approval of petty cash funds as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Kelly. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Imes?
Yes.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes. Motion carried. Board resolution authorizing the treasurer to obtain advances against tax collections.
McInnes, yes.
Second.
You? That was you, Ted?
Ted made
Yeah.
the motion. I seconded.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Discussion? Oh, please.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mr. Imes?
Yes.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Motion carried. The next is the approval of superintendent authorizations to employ temporary personnel to make offers of employment when the board is not in session directly to candidates for either teaching or non-teaching positions, and to acknowledge acceptance for such offers subjects to ratification by this board, to accept resignations which have been submitted by employees during time when this board is not in session, subject to ratification of the board, to appoint negotiation personnel, to enter into contract agreements for services needed in emergency situations, to approve applications for personal meetings which conform to established board policies and within the appropriations for such activities, and to establish the rate for substitute compensation in emergency situations subject to ratification by this board.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mr. Imes?
Yes.
McInnes?
Yes.
Mr. McKay? Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Rhymes and I must sound a lot alike on the motions. He's getting credit for all my motions.
Mike, let's just change that.
Hey, just mute me.
There we go. Sorry.
I just want to
No
get my name in the
problem.
minutes.
No
Yeah,
problem.
yeah. Whatever it takes. Okay.
All right. Next, the resolution for assistant superintendent or authorizations. Board resolution to authorize assistant superintendent to act as the purchasing agent for Marion City Schools. Motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Kelly.
Second.
Thank you, Gary. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Imes?
Yes.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Motion carried. Next, we'll move on to the appointments for legislative liaison.
I'd be happy to continue in that role.
Thank
Ted,
you, Ted.
yes.
All right. With that, we'll need a roll call, please. Or a motion.
So moved.
To to approve Mr. McInnes as our legislative liaison for the year.
Thank you, Gary. Second,
I'll second.
thank you, Kelly. Roll call, please.
Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Motion carried. Next is the appointment of Student Achievement Liaison for the district.
Leslie, had you been doing that?
Me.
I believe it was Coach Mack. I
Okay.
was happy to.
Do that, Kelly?
Pardon?
Would you like to do that?
No. I mean, if you want to continue, or Leslie, whichever,
I'm okay.
to continue.
I move
I
to
move
appoint
the- Go
Mr.
ahead.
McCreary as our Student Achievement Liaison for this year.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay.
Thank you, Ted and Gary.
Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Motion carried. Next is the creation of committees for 2021 calendar year. And I would like to recommend all of us, if you guys are in agreement, to stay on the current committees that we're on, since we're all kind of fairly new.
These are actually committees that are superintendent committees and are appointed by the superintendent. So if that's his pleasure, I'd be
Oh,
keep my same
yes,
assignments.
yes, thank you, Gary. Ron?
That would be my pleasure. Yes, Gary.
Okay,
And we do not vote on this. It's just an appointment.
okay.
Okay. Do we need to go ahead and list the names next to each committee?
No, we're just going to keep it as calendar year 2021, and then on forward agendas, it'll have the current names.
Perfect. All right. Any board announcements? If not, we will adjourn the organizational meeting at 4:53. If I can get a motion.
So moved?
Thank you, Mac.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kelly. Roll call, please.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider.
Yes. Motion carried.
Okay, we're going to out of that. Now we're going to get the other board agenda up here. All right. Okay. Do you want to do the pledge again? But we've done it once tonight, so.
I'm okay not doing it if
Okay.
everybody is okay with that.
Just call the roll. That'd be fine.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so roll call.
I'm gonna do 553. Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mr. McInnes,
Here.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Here.
Here. What-
All right. And before we go into the superintendent's report, I would like to have a moment of silence in memory of Amy Berry, who was a staff member of ours. So if we can just take a minute to reflect. All right. Thank you. All right. Ron, we'll move into superintendent's report.
Thank you, Leslie. I want to start tonight's report by recognizing all of you as school board members for your service. January is School Board Recognition Month. Normally during this month, we do a video where we have some children attend the meetings and some other community members express their gratitude for your service as a school board member. And unfortunately with COVID, though we are very limited to what we can do, we do promise as a school district that once we are able to get back face to face, that maybe we'll postpone that part of the festivities in recognition of the school board. But Mike, Kelly, Gary, Leslie, Ted, on behalf of all of the staff members here at Marion City Schools, we want to thank you personally for your service to us and appreciate what you do for Marion City Schools and the community every day. So as I said, hopefully we'll be able to really celebrate that at some point in time in a more formal manner.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And we've had to do that today because of the next item on the agenda, which is our COVID update. So currently, we are under our remote learning model. We did enter our remote model the week before our winter break, and we resumed the remote model through last week, and we will continue on through this week. I am very happy and pleased to report that Marion Public Health has issued a letter of guidance, recommendation, and support for Marion City Schools to return on January 19th in our hybrid model. And so we are bringing our students back in our hybrid model starting January 19th. Like to send a shout out to all of our staff members for preparing for the hybrid model. I got a chance to sit in on some Zoom meetings with some of the children, and it's very interesting, and the children have done a nice job participating. But you can see we're anxious to bring our students back into school on a more regular basis. And so kudos to our staff and our students for handling this remote period quite as well as they did. As I said, we do have a recommendation from Marion Public Health to return in the hybrid model. The good news is we have seen definitely a downtrend in the number of cases, in the number of quarantines and those students and staff members that have been affected by coronavirus. And so that's a good thing. We are currently working right now, as many of you may have heard, that educators and school personnel are part of Group 1B for the vaccine. Currently, Marion Public Health and Ohio Health are in the process of distributing the vaccine to those members of Group 1A, which are included the most at-risk population and some of the more vulnerable places like congregate care facilities for the elderly. I have confirmation that the Group 1B vaccinations will actually start on January 19th, but school board or school personnel, employees are scheduled to receive the vaccine starting February 1st. And so we are in conversations with both Marion Public Health and Ohio Health to work out the terms of that, what that vaccination looks like. Unfortunately, there is less vaccine available than was anticipated. And so there is somewhat of a slowdown in the amount of vaccine that is actually being delivered. Marion Public Health only receives about 100 doses per week, and that's typical of just about all of counties and communities like ours. And so they are somewhat behind in vaccinating Group 1A. There is a good chance that Marion General and Ohio Health will be able to assist in that process. We are certainly having those conversations about what February 1st looks like. We did poll our staff and some of the other personnel that would be eligible to receive the vaccine. We have about 70% right now of those that responded to the poll that would be interested in our planning to receive the vaccine. And so that's a bright spot for us. We need to, try and encourage as many folks as we can, as long as their doctors approve of them receiving the vaccination. And we're going to do everything we can to encourage our folks to receive the vaccination. So if we follow the plan and we are able to distribute the vaccine to our staff on starting February 1st, I am told that at this point, we are receiving the Moderna vaccine, which is Pfizer is the other vaccine that is available. The Moderna vaccine is a 2-dose vaccine and requires 28 days between the first administration and second. And so we will be at, sometime in mid-March, hopefully to be completed with both rounds of the vaccine, if that's the case. And so unless otherwise recommended by Marion, that we will remain hybrid model and do everything we can to get as many folks vaccinated as possible. When we get through that vaccination, then we are planning on bringing our students back on their basis. And the hope is that by April, that is hopefully a realistic timeline to bring our students back. So we need to keep our fingers crossed on the trend with the virus, but also the amount of vaccine that is delivered to us. And we hope that, enough vaccine will be delivered so that we can vaccinate all of those folks who are planning to get that. I don't know if there are any specific questions regarding what I know about the COVID updates to vaccine and where we're at trend-wise. But I can tell you that we have been working with Ohio State University to develop a more in-depth look at how the virus has affected our school system within itself. So we have the ability now to collect data just from within Marion City Schools, not necessarily the entire Marion County. And so we will be adding that feature to our dashboard. Hopefully by February, that should all be completed, and we will have that as well. That is up on our website.
Ron, I thought I saw or read something that the governor wants us back with our kids March 1st.
Thanks for bringing that up, Kelly. That's on my list to talk about too. So I just passed that right up. Yes, there was clarification on that. The governor, when he did announce the vaccines and that school employees would be part of Group 1B, he mentioned that all schools, in order to receive the vaccine, had to commit to returning to school by March 1st. He further clarified in a letter to us what returning to school actually meant. And actually, Marion City Schools has returned to school, and we do plan to return in our hybrid model, which is acceptable as a return model. So that statement was meant more for those districts, because there's been districts across the state of Ohio that have been remote the entire year. And so the commitment has to be to return to some in-person model, whether it be hybrid or what form of hybrid are all in. So thanks for asking that. Hopefully that clarified that statement.
Ron, do we know the plan for distribution? Like, will our staff go to a certain location to receive the vaccine, or?
Right. I think that all depends right now on, the organization that will administer the vaccine for us. There's a chance if Marion Public Health is responsible for administering the vaccine to personnel, they do have a clinic set up, I believe, over at Marca at the Board of DD. And so, we have to work through those logistics to make sure that we can allow staff to get there and get the vaccine. if Ohio Health is the entity that would help us with that vaccine, there is a good chance that they would actually come to the district and deliver the vaccine at each building. So we are in those discussions, I guess, but the answer to that is it depends on which organization is responsible for vaccinating our employees.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? If not, we will move to the Assistant Superintendent's report. And thank you, Ron.
Hello. So, in keeping with my update, you'll notice that mine is on the 2021-22 school calendar. So, attached to the board agenda, you will see 4 items. So the first you'll see is the school calendar policy. And then the other 3 items are example calendars that were sent to the staff for vote. So if you recall, in terms of the policy, the most important part of the policy essentially is that there's an opportunity for 30 days for public participation in terms of the calendar before the board is able to vote on that. But the other important component to the calendar is what is in our MEA negotiated agreement. And so some highlights from that are that we need to have calendars that have a long and short Christmas vacation, long and short spring vacation, and then examples of not returning to school the day after a major holiday. And so we have to have examples of those represented in our calendars when we put those out to vote for the staff. So we have 3 calendars that were sent to vote last week. And what we present to you are all 3 of those calendars, but also the information that calendar A was the most popular calendar voted on by staff. And so that's the information presented tonight. Again, during this time, we have the 30 days for public participation, and then we are able to vote. I should say you're able to vote on our calendar for next school year during the February school board meeting. I know you've had an opportunity to review those calendars, the board policy, and I know that we have shared the article within the MEA contract in the past, but do you have any questions that I can answer about any of those?
I do not.
Jen, that number, 62.6% seems a little bit low for the winning option. But how does that compare to other years?
I usually have that number right off the top of my head. I actually don't. I'd have to go back and review that, Gary, to be honest with you.
Well, that's not.
I know that last year we did like a calendar, like we had almost like 4 options. We went back and we had another option, and then in April or May, we we completely went back to the drawing board, and then again in July. So I actually don't remember the percentage, but I can get that. I could get that.
If you think about it, just
Okay.
Send it to me. I'll just kind of be curious to look at it.
All right. Any other questions for Jen? All right. Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome.
So we'll move on to the treasurer's report. If I can get a motion to approve board minutes from the December 14th meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Coach Mack.
Okay.
Is that you, Ted?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Roll call, please.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Board minutes approved. on to the motion to approve the following financial items: December financials and a transfer from the general fund to capital funds in the amount of $500,000.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Gary.
Second.
Thank you, Kelly. Any discussion? None. Roll call, please.
Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Motion carried. All right, next is the hearing of the public. I don't believe we had any
We did not.
submit anything. Okay. So we'll move on to the agenda confirmation.
There is one change on the non-teaching, let me look at, I can't remember if it's teaching or non-teaching. On the non-teaching supplementals, James Beach, right here, music accompanist. I think on your agenda, he is on step 1, but he should be hired on step 5.
Okay.
Can,
Right,
you know
thank
what?
you. So we-
I'm sorry, Leslie, I just got a text, there was a question about another person. Is it Marissa Koss?
I don't know anything about that.
She was listed with lay coach. She was listed with lay coaches, and I believe she might be a staff member.
She is, yeah.
That'll be fine.
Just
That's fine. That's just how we separate them, but as long as she's hired, it's fine. We're good with that one. And I'll make sure that they know that.
Okay. All right, so move on to the approval of the addition to the agenda of James Beach from 1 year to 5 year, or wait,
Yeah, 1 to 5.
1 to 5.
Yep.
Motion, please.
I move the approval of the agenda with that addition and change.
Thank you, Ted. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kelly. Roll call, please.
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mr. Imes.
Yes.
Great. Agenda approved. All right, I see there's no old business. We'll move on to the new business line items. Dr. Irusti recommends the approval of the following student for early graduation pending completion of her pathway and has met all other necessary requirements. She is a cohort 2022 who will be graduating with the class of 2021.
So moved.
Thank you, Kelly.
Second.
Thank you, Gary. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Motion carried. All right, now on to agreements and contracts. Marion County Interagency Agreement. Dr. Irusti recommends the approval of an interagency agreement between the school districts of Marion County Family and Children First Council, Marion Adolescent Pregnancy Program, Ohio Heartland Head Start, and the North Central Ohio Education Service Center to provide services framework for children who are eligible under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and operating standards for Ohio schools serving children with disabilities as presented, effective July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. Motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Gary. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Imes,
Yeah, yes.
Mr.
So,
McInnes,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes,
Mr. McCreary,
Abstain?
Mrs. Schneider.
Yes. Motion carried. Moving on to the consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered by the board to be routine and will be enacted by the board. In the motion in the form listed below, there will be no discussion of these items prior to the time the board votes on the motion unless the members of the board, staff, or the public request specific items to be discussed and removed from the consent agenda. The superintendent recommends approval of all consent agenda items. Employment is specifically conditioned on and subject to successful background checks, receipt, and final administrative review of all application records and receipt of all other necessary documents. Motion, please.
so moved.
Thank you, Kelly. Second.
Seconds.
Thank you, Ted. Any discussion?
Mm-mm.
All right, roll call, please.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes,
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mr. Imes,
yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, motion carried. All right. Move on down to the committee reports. Any updates given?
I think I sent out information about extracurricular and buildings and grounds. Some of the information on extracurricular, the musical is still being planned for March, and they have started rehearsals in person. Sensational, which is usually around February 1st, has been moved to the 20th. I don't believe the wrestling tournament is going to be rescheduled. I did send out information about fees for extracurricular and co-curricular. And let's see. I think the other things that we looked at were the numbers of our students that are doing winter sports. And we looked at that from the middle school perspective to the high school perspective in terms of boys and girls basketball, wrestling, and so forth. So we looked at all that.
Okay.
When
Anybody
did we want to talk about the issue of student fees
Correct.
for extracurricular? Is that tonight, or you're going to bring that up at a later board meeting?
I think the hope is that we look at it now and be able to make a motion for the February board meeting.
Well, does the committee have a recommendation?
I mean, Ron was there as well. I can tell you my personal feelings. I don't think we discussed it in terms of the whole committee, you know, but eliminating the extracurricular fees, which I believe each student pays, which is $50, is where we want to go with this. I think at one of our previous meetings, we talked to Veronica about, you know, the impact on the budget for that. So that's all the information I've got right now, Ted.
I wasn't completely clear about the difference between fees and perhaps the cost of a program. We're only talking the actual fee to participation fee, right?
Right, right. And then there's also the issue about band fees. because it's co-curricular and the class, this band is graded. And the other extracurricular activities are not. So, and I think Jen Mossbaugh was going to look at that with ODE, but I haven't heard back what's going on with that. But there is from my perspective is there's an issue with band fees for the $50 because they're required once marching band is over to participate in concert choir, which is, or excuse me, concert band. So it is graded.
Dr. Irucci, is there an administrative recommendation on this if we're to bring it to a vote in February?
Yeah, I think there's two issues here, really. Number one, we were looking at, the difference, as Kelly mentioned, between an extracurricular activity and a co-curricular activity. And so Jen Musbach and Chris Sabin had put together a document that kind of differentiated the two and what was then considered maybe a possible lab fee type thing that's as opposed to an extracurricular fee. So I think we have that kind of ironed out somewhat. And we certainly have to have that discussion about, if band is a co-curricular, it should not, if we're going to have a fee, it's not an extracurricular fee. It shouldn't be classified as that. That's just one part of it. But I think the overall discussion is, given the situation and the economic situation, is it relevant for us, given the changes in all the extracurriculars, to continue to charge the fee? And so I know we've already collected some fees, and I think probably what my recommendation would be is that the treasurer and I sit down and really look at that in depth and then make a recommendation to you in February as far as that's complete effect on the budget. I think there might be some opportunities, through some CARES Act money or some things like that we might be able to support. I have a definite concern over all of our extracurricular programs because of their lack of the ability to raise any revenues, both the booster clubs and the activities themselves, because of the lack of ticket sales, and all of those things. So I think that's even a much broader conversation that we have to have. And I'd like to discuss that with Veronica to gather some data to see exactly where we're at and what that looks like, because I feel like many of our kids, and we've always had some kids that did not have the ability to pay, and we have some scholarships. So we need to take a look at, the amount of kids who are willing or not. I mean, if it's an overall discussion about do we charge extracurricular fees in general, again, that would be a conversation that I would like to have with Veronica.
Ron, is it still $50 per fall? So actually it's 150, or is it 50 for everybody all year?
I'm pretty sure it's a prorated type of deal, where it's 50 for the fall, and then maybe it's and depending on how many kids you and your family have participated. If you want, I can get out the actual policy on that to you guys.
Well, we're still the cheapest in the county. I mean, River Valley's still 300, and that's just one season. So
I would like
How
to-
about if, I guess this conversation, there was something mentioned to me back in August. I wasn't at a board meeting, and then I didn't hear any more about it. Technically, a whole lot of work. I didn't put a whole lot of work into it. So how about if Ron and I gather data and information on what the fees are, how often they have to pay them, who pays them, how that compares to other districts, and we present that data to you at the February meeting. Because I couldn't sit here right now and tell you if a student pays $50 for the year or $50 for every sport. The high school does all that work, and the middle school does. So, and then we can tell you, what that impact would be, and then you guys can decide if it's something you want to keep doing, not keep doing. But if it would be okay with you guys, I think Ron and I could present a lot of information to you to take a look at.
I would appreciate that, and I think it's a good idea. I'm coming from a point of view that I'd really like to take the burden off of our families during this period of time of the COVID and the economic downturn a bit from the COVID. And so even if we did it for 1 year, I would like to see that in some form. I understand the study you have to make about co-curricular and what's just extracurricular and so forth. But I still think we'd like to look at it. I would like to look at it from the standpoint of taking the burden off the families. And even though we've already collected some this year, I think we could find a way to have folks apply for a refund of what they've already paid if we determine to do that for this school year and perhaps next, because this is not going to go, we're not going to change overnight. So anyway, that's my perspective as you and Ron look at it, and would be my view coming into the February board meeting.
Do we ever scholarship that $50 in regular times? I mean,
I do know that there is a fund of money that Sean has available to him that helps pay for students who can't afford it. Or
so
who
that's
have- has
but
shown
that's
him,
just
yes.
the athletics.
I don't know if there's anything for band. I do know,
Yeah.
I know that there's a fund out there. I don't know who actually
Right.
accesses.
Right.
We'll find that information out also.
Thank you.
And as far as Ron mentioning that a lot of the programs have not been able to raise any funds for their program during this COVID period, we do in the past have supplemented some of those programs with money from the general fund at the high school and the middle school. And perhaps on a short-term basis, again, out of the CARES money, perhaps we can increase those stipends for the near term to help them through a period they could otherwise raise their own funds.
I agree with that, Ted. I think it's important that we, try to help shore up that shortfall, because it can be devastating to lots of the programs that we have, to different sports and music and et cetera. So I think it's important that when we look at this, we try to make them viable through the next couple of years, even maybe.
Yeah, I know like Harding music parents have parents working bingo. And I think it's a real struggle to get those volunteers right now because of COVID. And so there's not that ability for parents to work off some of these fees.
Mhm.
So
So we
the
can't.
more we can
can't-
help them.
The one thing we can't do is we cannot give funds to our booster groups,
Right.
our music boosters, or music groups. However, I think that when we come to a situation where maybe there's some shifting of how we pay for things,
Yeah.
because we can't just give them money. So maybe I think probably what we would be looking at is we would pick up some expenses.
Right.
Right.
All right, so we'll stay tuned and more to come.
Yep.
All right, any other updates from any other committees?
Communications committee did meet. One of the things we talked about, again, on the financial side, is that we really don't have a budget for communications or public relations, as it were. And I think we'd like to request the treasurer and the finance committee going forward to look at a line item for that particular program or effort, because it does take money for pamphlets and newsletters and other things that if we had some money set aside for that, we could budget better and plan better on what we would like to do. So I'd like to put that in the other committee's ideas.
There is a budget for communications. There's a marketing and communications budget. I don't know, I'm not sure what the overall plan for the year is, so maybe it's not enough, but there is a line item in a budget for for marketing and communications.
I thought that was only for personnel and not necessarily for purchase of services.
We do. We have services and supplies.
Okay, because
Yeah,
like,
because like we did a newsletter earlier in the year. It's on that in that budget. I just don't know if maybe it's enough for what all the needs are.
okay.
But
Well,
there is, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm
sorry
not sure
about
what's
that.
on, I'm not sure what's in that line item in terms of whether that's paying for Allerton as a consultant or.
Yes.
And so what you're thinking about is in that budget item might not be the same that the committee's
Right.
thinking about.
So we have a budget for like supplies such as like mailings, printing, those kind of things.
Okay, that's good to know. If you could share
Yeah.
that with the committee,
Yes.
communications committee, that would be a great help.
Yeah. Sorry about that. That would be a miscommunication on my part. So
I think there is a communications committee meeting coming up too in I want to say it's like the 20th or so.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's the 21st.
21st.
1:45, yeah.
You know, previously, I would say you're correct. We did not have any. And when we had a communications director last year, we had started a budgeting process there and just kind of carried that forward into this year. So again, it might not be encompassing everything that you guys are looking at, but I'll get that to you. And then if that needs to be adjusted, just let me know.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Yep. Sorry about that.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Anything under the information and discussion items? All right. With there being none, there is a need to go into executive session for reason of personnel. If I can get a motion.
So move.
Thank you. Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Gary. All right, motion to go into executive session for reason for personnel at 5:32. Roll call.
Mr. McCreary,
Yes.
Mr. Imes,
Yes.
Mr. McInnes,
Yes.
Mrs. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. All right. We do not foresee any further action to take place tonight.
I'm going to,
Do we prove to go to leave?
you're going to want to go to,
You'll be invited to a breakout room.
and
That's what I'm asking, I guess. Is that what I
There we
need?
got it. It's
Yeah,
on,
and then
it's
you
on the
hit
screen
join.
now, Mike.
Okay, gotcha.
Ron, I'm going to make you the, well,
The host?
I was going to.
Thanks, John, by the way.
There you go.
Yes, thank you, John. Go Bucks.
See you, John.
All right.
Veronica, go Bucks.